Listen Up, the podcast edition. Hi, Vicky Kelty here with another fluency tip to help keep your English speaking seriously fun. And you're listening too. As I said, this is the podcast edition of the listening. It's not a tutorial, but chat, if you will. So I am kind of obsessed with podcasts lately. I've been going on a lot of walks and I like to listen to a podcast as I walk around town. And I want you to do that too, because I think it's a really, really great way to practice listening. So here is my advice for you. I want you to have in your phone in your possession some podcast all lined up and ready to go anytime that you find yourself with free time for listening to a podcast. Here are the podcasts I suggest for you. Now, I know you're expecting names of podcasts, and I will give some names in the description, but I'm going to basically explain different types of podcast that I want you to have because it will give you a mix of listening practice. And I think that that is more important to you than the specific podcast that you choose because that's really based on taste. So I want you to have an English learning podcast in your possession. Okay. So in your phone or wherever you keep a list of the podcast, have one section that says English Learning Podcast. And like I said, I'll add some in the description for you. And maybe I've been on a couple of the ones that I mentioned, so you can look for my episodes. And the reason that I suggest an English learning focused podcast is because those podcasts are about the thing that you like about learning English. And if you are here listening to this and you're like, I don't learn English, why are you telling me this? Then look for one in the language that you're learning, okay? That's what I do. And the second one that I want you to have on your list is a single host podcast. This one I like to have because they tend to be podcasts that are easier to listen to. They're easier to understand because it's just one person talking like I'm talking right now. But without any image, you can't see anything because it's just the podcast, right? So you're just listening. And these are really good for a number of occasions, but I really like to have these in my back pocket for the days when I am not feeling as confident in my language learning. And I just want something that feels easy and gives me a little pat on the back. Like, you can do it. You are still good at the language, even though today feels like an off day and you're struggling. Some days going for a walk and listening to that type of podcast is like, okay, I'm still doing good. I still got it. It's fine. It's just a bump in the road and it will all be fine. And I look for just a regular old run-of-the-mill fluent speaker in these podcasts. So I don't look for specific for podcasts that are specific to language learning for my solo host, my just one host podcast. And then the last one that I want you to have on your list for a rainy day is a 2 or more host podcast. So where it's multiple hosts, and so then they can interact with each other on the show. The show, like their podcast show, Um, and so that is helping to really give your ear a challenge and get you ready for conversations, and how sometimes the podcasts are edited in a way that people are not talking over each other, but sometimes they aren't. So it can just depend the difficulty that comes from these co-hosted or multiple host, or with guest, and just depends on how many people are in the room or on the recording, and that can change the difficulty for you. But come to it from a place of fun, come to it from a place of playing around, just giving your ear a chance to try it out and see what you can understand, see what you can learn from that podcast. And again, just look for what I call a fluent speaker. And when I say that, I just mean that the podcast isn't intended specifically for language learning, because you already have your language learning one. That was the first one I mentioned. And the question you might have is, well, how do I find these other podcasts though? And I will give you one of my favorite podcasts in the show notes, but I don't like I've mentioned, or I think I mentioned, I'm not here to suggest certain podcasts for you, because we all have different taste, and that's not the point of what I'm doing here today. I'm just trying to help you get your listening skills stronger, and or maintain them, keep them where you want them to be. And these are tricks that I use with my own listening, and that's why I'm sharing them with you. And they're what I suggest to students as well. And if you want to add speaking to it, then check out my product, Listen, Read, Speak, so that you can combine those two ideas, because I always love the option of adding speaking to the things that we're doing. And what I really want you to get from these podcast opportunity is just having so much fun with them. You listening to topics that you love. So go to Google, if you, or whatever search engine you like to use, and look for podcasts on the topics that you enjoy. And that's how you can find podcasts that aren't specifically language learning. Obviously, if that's the only thing that you enjoy, then just do language learning. But if you have other interest, which I suspect you might, then look for example, piano podcast, or I'm just looking around the room. Friends podcast, knitting podcast, chocolate podcast. I'm definitely going to check that one out. Lisa Frank stickers podcast, bird watching. I have a picture of an owl that I painted in elementary school. Ooh, painting. See, there are tons of topics. Just try and search based on that. And I can't guarantee it, but I can almost guarantee that just by searching whatever hobby or interest that you have, plus the word podcast, there's going to be a ton of stuff that comes up. And because you're doing the search in English, so do it in the language that you're learning, then that's how you find the podcast on that particular theme or topic, and listen to a couple of them. If you find one that you truly enjoy, share it with us. We would love to hear about it. And I can't wait to hear. So please tell us what podcast you have found, and happy listening. Bye now.